morning, good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the Law&Crime Network. I'm going to be your host, Julie Rendelman, for the next 2 hours. And that is Chris Watts talking about how he met his wife, who he eventually murdered. And he talks a little bit about how he had never really had a girlfriend before until he met her, and that she was probably the stronger of the personalities between the two of them. I want to bring in our special guest for this afternoon. It's Joseph Scott Morgan. Good morning, Joseph, or good afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's good to join you, Julie.
And Joseph, I know we call you a forensic death investigator, and you know, just for a moment, tell me, what are your thoughts? Why does an individual, if you can put yourself in his shoes, decide to make a statement after he's already confessed and already knows what his sentence is?
I don't know. It's kind of a head scratcher, and from the beginning, I was very reflective. I covered this case in multiple media outlets from actually day one. I was very vested in this particular case, and at the end, when it came time for him to confess, it left me wanting because I wanted, just like BTK was required all those years ago, I wanted him to allocute in court. I wanted to hear what happened. I wanted him to stand and deliver and state in the affirmative everything that he had done, to give us the details, because that's one of the things that kind of left us, wanting here. What was your rationale behind this? What did you do with these precious little children? What did you do with your pregnant wife? And why he would do this at this point in time, I have no idea. I don't know if he's leveraging something, or I have nothing. I have no idea as to what he has to gain. But I wish it had taken place sooner.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that we wish that. And sometimes I wonder. We always talk about these different individual serial killers and the like that want to talk after they've either been convicted or they're facing death row. And the question I always ask myself is: are they doing it to help the victims, or are they doing it in their own way to almost brag about what they were able to accomplish? He's a little different. I think he's a unique one, if there can be such a thing. And I'm confused a little bit about why he is at this point choosing to give such details.
Yeah, and the nature of what he's going on here with Julie is just ghastly, absolutely ghastly, and I don't understand what's the impetus behind this. And again, I'm a cynic. I've either been conducting death investigations or commenting on death investigations my entire adult life, and I always think that there is something to be leveraged here, particularly when you have an individual that is a convicted murderer that is now housed for the rest of his life in this place in Colorado. And I still want to know, well, what's the compelling interest here? Did he suddenly have some kind of spiritual awakening, relative to his worldview or something? And I don't even know that that's not even a substantive rationale for it, because the kindest thing he could have done from Jump Street was to offer some type of balm, some kind of salve on the souls and the hearts of these family members that are left behind in his wake. This brutal event that he took place in, just an absolute massacre. So I have to think, being the cynic that I am, there's something to be gained here on his part.
Sure, and we're going to talk more. I'd like to take another look at some additional footage of the audio statement that he gave to investigators. Let's take a look, and then we can analyze it with Joseph Scott Morgan.
What were you thinking this whole time? Like,
in the back of my head, I was just telling myself, what are you doing? Like, every time, I open up my phone, I can see pictures, and, of my wife and my kids, and just like, what am I doing? And then, every time I was with her, it seemed like I didn't think. It seemed like it was like a blinder that was in my face.
Oh.
And it was every time I look back on it, I have pictures of my wife and kids and myself, and every night, or every morning, every night, I just, talk to them, say I have this book I used to read for CC, and I remember that book, so I read that to them like every night. And like there's some scripture and stuff that I read to them, so I just try to think back. Like I wish this never happened. And just like I wish that blinder wasn't on my head, right in my eyes. That would have seen what was going on. Like I was having. Like everybody said, "Oh, you're just out there having fun while your kids, or kids and wife are on vacation." I'm just like, no, it wasn't like that. But it seemed like that's what it looked like when you're going, when you're going to camping, going to drag race, going all that other stuff that you have fun doing, but you're with somebody else. It's not your family. It just didn't seem right. With her, it just didn't seem like I could even see that anymore. And I was there at her house pretty much every night. So it was like I didn't have that time at home just to really think about anything. Because literally I didn't, I was only at home from when I got home from work. I worked out, I ate dinner, and then I went over to her house. I never slept in my house the whole month of July.
And here we have Chris Watts talking about the relationship he had with one of his children, where he used to read books to her at night, including the scripture. I mean, Joseph Scott Morgan, you can hear perhaps some level of tears. I want to ask you about, to go back to your cynicism, which unfortunately I have along with you, because, I have trouble feeling sorry for him, which is almost how I feel he wants me to feel. And quite frankly, I think we all end up feeling quite the opposite.
Yeah, we do. And again, this is something that in forensics, those moments that we have alone at the scene where we're looking over this destruction that is left in its wake. You're there, on a crime scene. You have this silence, this deafening silence that's in your brain as you're working through the eyes of a scientist, but yet there's a narrative that's painted before you in the images that you're seeing. And it really gives you pause to think, how could somebody do this? What was their motivation? And, I got to tell you, I've obviously witnessed the aftermath of many of these horrible events. And still, the most dangerous question someone, I think probably to a lesser degree, attorneys in the court, but certainly I know myself as an investigator, the most dangerous question we can ever ask, and it's a question everybody wants to have answered, is why? Why will drive you to insanity? The best thing that you can do is talk about what, how, these sorts of things. How did this take place? Because you'll never understand why.
Now, I agree with you completely. Let's, speaking of why, I think that, when we start to delve into these audios, which we're about to do, we're going to start to hear a little more details about the day that these individuals were killed through Chris Watts' own words. Let's take a look. And as we listen to the Chris Watts audio taped confession, we start to hear what at least Chris Watts' view is the breaking point, where it became a conversation with his now deceased wife to her brutal murder and the eventual brutal murder of her two children. I want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan. And the interesting thing you start to hear is here he is saying he's in bed with his wife. They've had sex, and then he decides to tell her, because he thinks she must know at this point that he has another relationship, that things aren't working. And the buzzword seems to be that she says to him, well, you're not going to see your kids again. And it sounds like that seems to be when everything all breaks loose. Thoughts?
Yes, it kind of sets him off at that point in time. And, let's go back. He talked about the gift card, and that came up quite a bit in the conversations that we had over the period of time. He was trying to hide, if folks will remember at home, and I know our listeners will, he was trying to hide this relationship with this other person, and she was onto it. She was aware of it. Some people have stated that was her rationale for actually leaving. It wasn't just a business trip. She needed to get her head clear. Came back that night. They're laying in bed. He says that he hears her or feels her get in bed, hears her stirring around. She rubs him, rubbing his back. and they engage in sex at that point in time. But then there's that period of time where he states that it was then we woke up, or he woke up, and this conversation, begins. His direct quote was, "It's not going to work. It's not going to work." I didn't particularly understand what he meant when he stated, "Get off of her." I don't know if he meant that he was atop of her and she's saying, "Get off of me," or if she is referring to the mistress, "Get off of her, leave this be" at this point in time. So a bit confused by that. But yeah, I think that there's this kind of epiphanal moment for him where he realizes that he's way in over his head. Now he makes this fateful decision. Now there's people all over this country, Julie, as you well know, you're an attorney, that have illicit affairs. They don't wind up killing their spouses, though.
No, they
did.
Don't.
He did.
Yeah, no. There's other ways to get out of a marriage. That's for sure. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna be right back. Thank you. And welcome back to Law and Crime. Your host, Julie Rendelman, for the next hour and a half. We're following the breaking story of Chris Watts out of Colorado. As you know, Chris Watts pled guilty to the brutal murder of his wife, Shanann, and their 2 young children. His wife was also pregnant with their unborn child at the time that he committed this horrible murder. If those of you recall in the press, he had been initially saying that someone else did it and eventually confessed. He is now serving life without the possibility of parole and has since sat down with investigators to give information, more detailed information about the brutal death of his supposed loved ones. Let's take a look at some statements he made about how it came to be that he ended the life of his family.
Everything, just reading the scripture more and more now, I can see God gave me opportunities to get out. Even my friend Jeremy Lindstrom, he even invited me because it was his daughter that came and watched the kids on that Saturday night. And he was like, "Hey, you said we're going to a Rocky game. You want to go to me with the Bronco game and watch the Arizona Cardinals?" In my mind, it was go. Just say, "Hey, I can't find a babysitter." Bye. And maybe that would have been a light switch in my head goes off, light switch in her head goes off, maybe it just goes different directions. That was kind of my last opportunity to kind of get out, it seems like. I wish I would have said, "Yeah, let's go." And I think that would have just put me on a different trajectory.
So then on that night, was it just a new type of fight?
It was
never had, or what happened?
Yeah, it was a totally different type of fight. It was, just felt like, I don't know, it was more anger than anything else. There was emotion to it at first, and then it just felt like it was just anger. It was just like there was no love there. It was kind of what we were saying, what she was saying, it was just it's almost like we knew something was combating at each other. We didn't know, it wasn't ourselves.
Really?
No.
Anger from you or anger from her?
I think it was more anger from me and more desperation from her because she wanted to fix it. Yeah. She knew if something wasn't right.
Here we have Chris Watts talking to investigators about the fact that first, he indicates that he wishes that he had gone in a different direction. Had he gone out that day with one of his friends, perhaps things would have happened differently. And then the question that investigators asked him was basically, what happened? What type of fight was this? And what I'm sensing from Chris Watts, and Joseph Scott Morgan is here to kind of analyze this, is that he indicates this is not the normal fight that they had, that the fight that was happening caused him to have the anger that he had never felt before. I think he described that he didn't love her anymore, and the anger kind of spewed over. Joseph Scott Morgan, one of the questions when we ask about why is that, some people wonder, did he premeditate? Did he plan this? even a skeptic, I do wonder, there is a part of me that tends to believe this was not a planned event, that somehow he snapped. No excuse, but I think that, when I'm listening to him, I tend to believe that aspect of it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that looking at this, there's planned and then there's planned.
Right.
If you're not planning, for me, it's almost like a reactionary event where you go to no lengths whatsoever to hide the mortal remains of someone. Was it a reactive event? Potentially. But then planning kicked in at that point in time. It's kind of an odd case because he's left with the body of his wife after he takes her life away. What is he going to do with her at that point? And that's where planning comes in. So it's kind of a bit of both, if you will. And what's he going to do with her? Well, he has to have a place to put her. And was he thinking all along? Well, what am I going to do with these kids now? And that's a big head scratcher.
Yeah, no, I want to talk more about it. We're going to take another clip, and then I want to analyze that a little more, because I think you are right. There is an aspect of it after his wife is dead that the planning really does kick in. It's not just what he's going to do with his kids, what he's going to do with his wife's body, and eventually what he's going to do with his children's body. Let's take a look at this clip, and we'll talk some more.
I woke her up to talk to her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And is that because it was just eating at your brain?
Yeah, I knew, something wasn't doing right with me. So I know, she knew. I just knew she knew. I just felt like maybe the kids weren't going to be there when I got home that day.
Oh, interesting. Now, I don't mean to offend, but I have to ask, is that really the truth? Okay.
I really felt like they weren't going to be there when I got home that day.
Oh. And
Like she would take them somewhere?
No, I just felt like either maybe I wouldn't go home, maybe they weren't going to be there, or I wouldn't be allowed in, type of thing.
I think I saw some text messages where Sheehan talked about that she would take the kids to another state or something because she wouldn't be able to afford to live in Colorado or something like that. Did she say that kind of stuff to you, or
Yeah.
what did she say about that?
She said she couldn't afford to live in Colorado on her own, and that I told her, drive, and she pretty much makes the same amount I do.
Yeah.
But she said she wouldn't want to try, just because Colorado just price of living there was a lot higher than North Carolina.
And just so I'm clear, you thought maybe in your mind, you thought maybe she would take the kids somewhere else, or lock you out of the house, or
just I wouldn't want to make a scene, trying to pound on the door, trying to get in or anything like that. But I just felt like that was what I did on Sunday. It was kind of or Saturday night was kind of like the last straw. Kind of like going out with somebody and using an actual bank account card and just not trying to hide.
And this is an interesting thing that Chris Watts is saying. He's saying, there were thoughts that perhaps his wife was going to leave with the kids and move to another state because she couldn't afford to live where they are. And I want to bring you back in, Joseph Scott Morgan, because my question is if they were going to leave, then why does he need to kill them? If in a sense he's not going to have them in his life, in a sense, if he wants to be with this new woman, why not let them go, and then he doesn't have to end the life of these three beautiful individuals?
I think his statement that his kids would not be there, neither would she, is pure projection and fantasy. That maybe all things will work out like they're supposed to, and that there won't be any pain involved in this. And maybe at one level, this is a trigger mechanism. When he realizes that is, in fact, not going to be the reality, this fantasy he's created. And trust me, you don't have to be insane to create a fantasy.
But what is that fantasy? What is the fantasy?
Well, I think ultimately the fantasy is the fact that he's going to live his life the way he wants to. This girlfriend that he has on the side now, they're engaged in a very intimate relationship, and that his family would just simply go away and save him the pain and the heartache of having to make other decisions and perpetrate what he eventually perpetrate. I think that this, at one level, this may have been resting in the back of his mind all along. I mean, we'll never know.
That's true.
But, potentially it could have been.
Yeah, no, by the way, as you said, we will never know the real why. We can only shake our heads, scratch our heads and question. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more of this interesting audio statement of Chris Watts. So I want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan to talk about this for a moment. Joseph Scott Morgan is a forensic death investigator out of Jacksonville State University in Alabama. Thank you for being with us. What he's describing is what every man and every woman who's having an affair describes, which is they found someone new who makes them feel alive, makes them feel good about themselves. And I hate to rehash this, but that's nothing new. And so you can't, and I guess we always go back to scratching our heads saying, like, how the heck in the world do you go from having an affair to brutally murdering your pregnant wife and your 2 kids? And there's such a selfishness in what he's describing as is, let alone the next step he took to kill them. My mind is just blown when I listen to this, although I'm never shocked.
No, hopefully we never will be shocked or cease to be shocked. The old adage comes to mind, it's always greener over the septic tank. And there's a distinct imbalance here. It's a real asymmetry when you talk about, okay, well, you're bored with your relationship. This is equal to the lives of this precious family that you've been gifted. And the two things, for those of us that walk around out here day in and day out and don't go around killing those that are supposedly in our circle that we love the most, it's a real head scratcher, and you can't come back to center and kind of be able to rationalize that. That's why I go back to this idea that for all of these years that I've looked at cases inside and out, why drives you to madness? Because you never can fully understand it, no matter how hard you try. And I guarantee you that even in the wake of these statements that we're listening to, there are still going to be whys. Why in the world would you do this?
Sure.
Why in the world would you do this? Why would you just destroy their lives and then all of the secondary and tertiary victims that are involved in this as well? Why would you impact the world in which you indwelt like this?
Yeah.
All for your self-centered behavior?
Yeah, he had everything. He has absolutely nothing now. We're going to take a look at another clip, and then we'll do some further analysis.
So then shenanigans in the truck. Then went back to the house.
Got everybody back in the truck.
Was Bella first or was Cece first?
In the truck.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So Shanann was first, and then Bella was next. Was Bella alive when you guys got in the truck? Oh, okay. What happened?
I woke back up.
Okay.
I don't really want to talk about this part, honestly.
Okay.
Those are my kids. This is my baby. I have to talk to them every night. I have to see them.
Okay.
Every time I see pictures of them, I don't know how this could have happened. Being a dad was the best part of my life. I took it all away.
I think that's the hardest part for us, Chris, is we see those videos, we see that love that you had for your girls. Like, it's obvious to us, and even to us, it's hard for us to understand how a dad who's given piggyback rides and, making snacks and watching princess movies and those kinds of things, how you get to that point,
I don't know. Like I said, it was just like something else was controlling me that day. I had no control over what I was like to fight back.
Yeah.
Like when that prosecutor said that Bella bit her tongue, like repeatedly, I just wanted to just bang my head up against the wall.
And so we're hearing Chris Watts break down for the first time, at least during this interview, where he talks about the fact that he killed his children and how he doesn't know how he had done that because he had loved them so much. Joseph Scott Morgan, one of the things I heard him say is something to the effect of he had lost control. Maybe I misunderstood him, but it sounded like he was using those words. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, he did. He stated that he lost control at that moment in time. So what he's telling us is that he no longer possessed the restraint to move forward and, commit this heinous act. And you have to really, I think that people at home and all around want to know, what's the measure of that? How at what point do you get to where you breach that point where you're so out of control that you're going to wrap your hands around someone's throat whom you dearly love and strangle them, or take a blanket and smother them, or just name any number of things. What's that point in time where you're going to cross that threshold? And I don't know that he offers up any good excuse. He does, in fact, offer up blubbering.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back. As a former homicide prosecutor, you expect me to be immune from hearing such brutality, and I don't think you ever get used to it. I want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan because, we understand that the wife of Chris Watts was asphyxiated, and I know I used to deal with that a lot in many of my trials. People seem to think that there's a shorter time period for someone to die that way, and I hate to talk so brutally, but I think it's important for our audience to understand what that means and what happens.
No, you cannot separate the brutality in this case. People need to understand this. Let's go back just for a second, Julie. Do you remember when Chris was talking in the interview where he was talking about straddling her? He was atop of her, in my opinion at least, and it would seem that it syncs with what the pathologist was finding as well. She was in what's called a supine position in bed. That means she's face up in bed. He's atop of her. Remember, she's pregnant, so it's in very tight quarters here. He's atop of her. In her evidence of injury, the autopsy report indicates that on the right side, and folks at home will literally feel this kind of a large body in the center of their throat. This is the thyroid cartilage. There are these little muscles that run alongside, and they originate up by the tongue, but it runs alongside. One of the things that we look for in cases of strangulation are actually hemorrhage into these muscles. And I think that he asphyxiated her by probably applying what's referred to as a C-clamp. Now, it's on the right-hand side. It's in this aspect right here. So he would have applied a C-clamp. This is called C-clamping, and for those that don't know, this is referred to as throttling when you use both hands. There's not as much hemorrhage on this side, so it would mean that the dependent area would be resting where my thumb is right now. Keep in mind, Chris Watts was in really good shape. Julie, you remember seeing the photos of him?
Oh, yeah,
he had been buffed up. He had lost weight. He's going to gym regularly. And this is a woman that is not only pregnant, but she has medical issues of her own. And she's just come back from this long, protracted trip. And we all know what it's like to step off of a plane. You're bone weary at this point, not to mention she's pregnant. So it would not have taken much to asphyxiate her. And I think that he did this by manual strangulation.
Well, when you say not taken much, let's just be clear. It's not easy to do something like that.
No, it's not easy to do it, but when you consider, I'm factoring in the fact that she's in a weakened state, she's tired, she's in this dreamlike sleepiness, and he's overpowered her. He set his course on doing this, and this guy is strong, and he's able to do this atop of her, this pregnant woman.
Sure. Thank you for those details. We're gonna go to another clip, and then we'll analyze it further. Thanks.
I remember you kept telling me that. You kept saying, I didn't know what I was doing, Tammy. I didn't know.
When you asked me about the sheet, what were you doing? I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah. I think you were just in automatic mode, or it seemed like. So did you drive straight out there? So what were you thinking on the way out there?
I was kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm just like, nervous, shaking, not knowing like, what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like I know like my life is completely changed. I don't know like what's happening. Like honestly, like I try to picture that whole ride, like it's like 45 minutes to an hour ride out there. And it's just like, couldn't I have like saved my girl's life? Couldn't I have done something? Why did I do that? I don't know.
Right.
Like this is my flesh and blood. This is like what I wanted all my life, was to be a dad, just to have, kids, and they love me, they, all that, and it just nothing made sense.
Right.
Like the oil tank, nothing made sense. I'm just like, what are you doing?
And there's Chris Watts talking to investigators about the options he had in terms of whether he had to have killed his children. Joseph Scott Morgan, I just want to bring you in just to, here you have two investigators that are talking to him, obviously after he's already pled, so there's not, they're not being analyzed for whether or not they're being forceful or not, but they're doing an incredibly, I think, effective job of letting him talk and not making them the focus, but making him the focus, which I think is something that a lot of investigators can learn from when it comes to taking a defendant's statements, especially in a case like this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This isn't coffee table talk. You have to be able, and it's called active listening. It's where you ask open-ended questions. You make it a comfortable environment for this individual. It doesn't mean that the investigators like this guy, but you can tell they're kind of, they're giving at least the appearance that they're warming up to him. They ask him open-ended questions, but yet they're directing him a bit to try to just get him to offer up a narrative about what happened. Keep in mind, there's no skin in the game at this point in time. He's already been sentenced now, so he can hold forth with whatever he wants to hold forth. It's a much more comfortable moment in time than it was earlier when they interrogated him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They did an incredibly effective job, and certainly something that I think allowed him to be more forthright, if he was going to be, with regards to the details of what happened. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with some more of the audio taped statement. And we look forward to Brian Ross Investigates at 5:30 p.m. I want to bring back my guest, Joseph Scott Morgan. He is a forensic death investigator out of Jackson State University in Alabama. Joseph, one of the things we were talking about before is that you noted, or they noted, that on Cece, which is, I believe, the younger of the children, that she did not have the particular hemorrhage that you had referred to as something that can be commonplace when it comes to asphyxiation. In any way, does it make it possible that she died differently than her sister did? Okay, I think we're having some trouble hearing.
You got me now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay.
Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard my question.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I got it.
If you want to start over so everyone can get
sure.
a chance to hear you.
Yeah, the thing about this is that we can pair up, once again, his strength with the weakness of the small child. She had no defense in this particular case. She's very fragile, very young. And it was, I'd like to say, I hope that it was quick. I don't know that it was. But he asphyxiated her. And let's keep in mind that not only did he place his hand over her mouth, he states that he used her blanket as well as a facilitator in this particular case of death. And so, there was very little trauma to Cece's body. Of course, Bella has a full awareness of what's going on. And remember what he just said there, Julie. He said that Bella stated to him, I don't want this to happen to me. How can you continue on in light of this?
Yeah, no, it's hard to imagine. I know you're probably going to be back with Aaron Keller, but do you have any final thoughts before we end this afternoon session about what we've been watching?
Well, there's some relief in this. I got to tell you, Julie, I'm pleased that we have some answers at this point in time. Again, I have no idea what this guy's motivation is for doing this. I'm glad that it should have happened a long time ago. I think he should have been compelled by the court to allocute in the midst of this, but I'm glad that we have it right now.
I agree with you. I'm going to be signing off, and Aaron Keller is going to be back with the Daily Debrief. Thank you for being with us.